a star in the nighttime. I'ma go hard when it's my time. Yeah, I'm hard and I'm light. You know you can't pause when the time's right. Sitting in the stars and watching you. You gotta ride the tug away.
Good evening and welcome to Season 3 on Chatbox with Sam. Tonight's guest is actor, writer, director Tom Konkle. Hi Tom, how are you?
Hello, thanks for having me on. It's really a pleasure, Samantha.
Oh, you're welcome, Tom. It was
Sure.
You know, I asked you and you announced it on Twitter and it was great and I thought that was awesome.
Well, we've met in a really unique way. We met through our mutual connection with Tony because I was joining the team with one of those shows and you were associated with them.
Yeah, Seven Seas Project with Safe Harbour Films. Tom Konkle is actually the showrunner for that. We both can't say too much because of an NDA. This obviously the project's on hold right now because of things going on. But
yes,
we're both very much looking forward to that with Vernon Wells and Bill Kilpatrick.
Two great guys. Yeah. So here is a little trailer for Trouble Is My Business, the film noir set in 1947. It's about a detective named Roland Drake that I happen to play. And Roland has been evicted from his life. He's sort of in the last throes of failure when in walks redemption with curves. Let's take a look.
It is a delightful surprise, isn't it? Stop! Stop! Here. Use the pillow. It helps with her pain.
You don't have the guts!
You can't leave well enough alone, can you? We could stop doing this. I had it all wrapped up in a neat little box. She doesn't have to be found. Yeah, so that little black book was worth killing her, huh? No, you killing her was worth it. I protected, sir, my city and the profitability of our ventures. I was mad that you didn't get the chair for murdering that backstabbing little whore. Well, I guess you don't control everything, do you? Oh, yes, but there is one thing I control tonight. You may disappear.
That's a shame, because I have the black book.
Liar.
You risk it.
The only one at risk is you.
Yeah.
No one knows you're up here with me. Now, we'll spend enough time together for you to tell me where the book is now. If not, you, eventually, will beg me to throw you off this roof. You're a missing person. You always were. Nobody's gonna come and find you because nobody cares.
Pull up a chair. Got a nice view. We got options.
You don't have any options. You are going to disappear.
I think you did to Catherine Montemar.
I heard tonight. Let me clue you in. She's dead.
Dead? Dead? You're lying. How?
I ask the questions. You give the answers. If you don't, you are going to...
Sir!
Turn around, officer. Get back to what you were doing. No, it's not that, sir. You said you didn't want to be interrupted unless he showed up. He's here.
All right. Such a nice evening. Really nice evening. You know, I think I'll give you a break until I get back. How about a jaw?
Fantastic. I have a great Vernon story how I met him, if you're interested.
Yes, please
you
do
couldn't
share.
write this.
Come on.
Could not write this. So I was a big fan of The Road Warrior when I was a kid. It's actually the first beta tape I ever bought. I was always interested in being a filmmaker and an actor, and that was one of the movies that I just resonated with. So I move out here in 1988, and I'm pretty much living in my car looking for a place to live. And I worked at this place called Circuit City, which was an electronics store in Van Nuys, which I would never be at. It's the only time I worked retail, but I had to survive for Christmas. And in walks Vernon Wells. And I'm like, from one of my favorite movies, I'm like, I'm in Hollywood. So I go running up to him. This is 21-year-old Tom. And I look up at him in the Walkman department. And I say, one day, I'm going to make a movie with you. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, right, kid. And then just walks and moves on. Flash forward 25 years. I'm strapped in a chair making a feature that I'm directing and acting in with him. And I look up at Vernon and I'm like, I was right. He's like, what? And I go, I told you this in 1988 that I was going to make a movie with you. And he's like, you got to be kidding. I'm like, no, it did. And here I am making a movie with you at least 25 years later. And that's literally how we met. He walked in. It was the first celebrity I ever saw in LA was him. And when I did my feature, he's the villain in my movie. There is some CGI in it. It's a combination of many things. It's a film noir set in 1947, so I had to create that world. So I used some computer-generated images to do set extensions. I tried to shoot on location as much as possible and get references, but some things you just simply couldn't recreate. I couldn't get LA streets with the streetcars on them. I couldn't get this mansion that the people live in that looks like it's from 1947. So I compartmentalized it into almost like a play. I did all the location stuff, which was very cinematic, and then the other stuff, I built a green screen stage and actually, built it out of wood and mapped out how I wanted to film it, rehearsed it like a play, and often the same, 20 feet of that green screen could be outside in a cemetery. It could be at the dining table. It could be inside this mansion. So I took it and repurposed it all the time. And in creating Trouble Is My Business, it has 2,000 visual effects in it, which is very ambitious for an independent film, for a small movie. And it really is, the way I came up with it was, old film noirs like Out of the Past or, Maltese Falcon, those were considered the low budget sort of B movies. They didn't have a lot of money. They were kind of the redheaded stepchild of cinema. They weren't like the big MGM things. And I thought, what if that aesthetic was applied to movies now? Right. If I created an independent film now, wouldn't I have those same restrictions? But I could shoot lean and make the style and the darkness of it part of the way the story is told. That you don't need to light huge, expansive things. It's all about faces and mood. So that's really why I chose to make that particular film in that style. And then just the black and white made it very dreamlike for me. I love that.
Love that.
I had to do it in color though too. Yeah, I have it in color on some things. Color had to be on some platforms. They won't take a black and white movie anymore.
Really?
Yep. You can't get a black and white movie. Like Tubi TV, I had to deliver it in color. Amazon, I had to deliver it in color. Yeah. They just wouldn't take it in black.
They're classic.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think there's a bias where they're like, well, people worry that it's an old movie or something. I'm like, okay. But yeah, it's tough because when I shot it. Yeah, exactly. And when I shot it, it was a good thing at the last minute, Samantha. I thought, you know what? I'm going to make sure like the outfits and the paint and everything matches some kind of palette. Like I have to design it in color and black and white. So I had a monitor in black and white and a monitor in color, and I had to do both.
Right. Wow. That's amazing that
it
you
was
had
crazy.
to do it in both. Yeah, it is, because I think, especially with Vernon, he's got that Australian accent, and he's got that. He's like a teddy bear, but he's like a rough teddy bear. He's walking in, but he
is.
He does.
I call him like Mount Rushmore. Yeah.
Right, he does fit that 40s look. He really does. Going way back from Mad Max. He goes, and the other films that he's played in, but he did fit the look really, really well, and the actress in it was very good too, and the effects I thought was amazing.
Thank you.
I know you've worked with John Cleese.
Yes, I have.
And John McNulty. Yeah. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Well, John Cleese, in my other life, I'm an actor and a sketch comedian. I've done sketch comedy my whole life. Like I started doing it with a tape recorder, playing all the voices when I was like 5 years old,
right?
And doing like Peter Sellers voices, and I did a lot of British comedy, actually. Yeah, I mean he's a huge influence on me as well, as was John Cleese, and I always wondered, would I be good enough to go toe to toe? Like, was I the authentic thing? And so I toured, probably 11 years, 12 years, doing a double act with this guy, Dave Beeler, where I would write sketches and do like, a 90-minute sketch show, old school sketch show. And then I had a sketch troupe called McFlap that we went everywhere. I mean, we did all the festivals, we did everything. And I took that discipline of learning sketch, because sketch is its own thing. It's like writing a short story is different than writing a novel. Being funny in a sketch is about not only listening to the other person, it's not stand-up, it's bouncing off, but it's creating little stories that are self-contained, little sketches. They don't have to have a beginning, middle, and end, but they have to have a flow. So I learned that discipline over a couple decades, and use that in commercials, because those are basically short sketches.
You've been in a lot of commercials, haven't you?
Yeah, I've done probably 110 commercials.
Wow.
Did a lot of them. There was a time when I went out every day for a commercial, and I was really grateful for that, because doing the commercial enhanced that discipline, but also freed me up to do the theatrical things, because when you have that, your job is really driving around, trying to find a job. When you're driving around to do auditions, and then the commercial's sort of the candy, that's the reward. And I was doing them at a time when if you had one on national network, it was great. You could get healthcare, you could get all this stuff. And that discipline, though, in a weird way, led me to John, because I was a huge Fawlty Towers fan, huge Monty Python fan, and I always wondered, it's like, what would it be like? I could have hung out with those guys. I would have gotten along with them great. Well, I happened to meet Michael Palin. I was worked on his show called The Pacific Rim, where he went around he did a bunch of travel shows. And I was his liaison from Mexico on up. And I thought, oh, that's cool. Then I met Eric Idle. But Cleese was always my,
Oh, yeah.
So I get a call. Yeah.
I think he's most people's,
Yeah, I was like, oh. Yeah. So I get this call from a French producer. And I had played a British character in his TV spot. And he said, Michael Palin or whoever can't do this thing on football for the World Cup. It's a special. Can you do like your best 4 minutes you've ever done as an audition? I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, it would be you and John Cleese in a 2-man sketch show. And I was like, wow. Okay. So I focused down, and because I had been on stage, again, this is preparation and opportunity, is because I had this deep bench of sketches and characters that I'd done, I just fired them off, and it was like a muscle that was well trained. So nailed it. And I ended up, they said, well, why don't you drive up, start working on the script with him, go up to his place. He lived in Santa Barbara at the time. So here I am driving up in my car to John Cleese's house. And as I pull in, I see his little face in the window, kind of looking out to let my car in the gate. And I was like, you know what? If you played folk music and you could play with Bob Dylan and you were any good at it, that's sort of an affirmation that you have your own thing. You're not just copying someone else's style. You're not just doing it. That you belong there. And it was really eye-opening for me, because by the end of it, he was so comfortable. We just sit on his sofa and work on this thing, and we filmed it, in and around where he lived. And it was funny. We had this German director who had no sense of humor, so we had to rely on each other. We were like, what do you think? Did that work? Yeah. And by the end of it, it was a masterclass in not only performing, but in writing and how to handle people. Like he had a very classy way of learning everyone's name. You know, he would be like, "Ah, that's Mate, the DP," and he would know everyone. But the best compliment I got is his personal hairdresser and makeup artist. She goes, "Well, I haven't seen anyone stand toe to toe with John. You're really funny. He loves you. He talks about you every day." So I got to do 26 sketches with him in
That's
this show that aired.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's called The Art of Football, and it aired before the World Cup for about 5 years. So it was seen with millions of people, except in the U.S., where football didn't mean anything.
Right.
So it didn't make the impact here that it could have, where it's like, oh, it's Tom Konkle and John Cleese in a TV show, and I was like in the credit, like it was me and him, but because it didn't air here, it didn't make the same impact here,
Right.
if that makes any sense. So it was quite big there. If I went to Europe, it was like, I know you,
Yeah.
but here it's like, football? You mean soccer?
Do you know
it's
what's funny?
completely different.
During the World Cup, John Cleese
Yeah.
tweeted out, "It's football, not soccer." I tweeted that, and I was
Exactly.
like, "Yes, it is,"
Yes.
because Americans call it soccer, and it's not. It's football.
They do. They call it soccer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not.
and I remember he did some tweeting, and he used a clip of he and I doing the different rules of football. So I'd see in his Twitter feed like me standing next to him in the uniform while he's doing some sketch on it. So he must have liked doing it. We had a ball, and we kept in touch for years after. Always talking, and we should do something, but we haven't. But he was such a gentleman, and we had great times, and I learned so much from him as a performer, as an actor, just learning comedy. I have this audio fiction podcast called Mindstream, and I do very Python-esque, comedy. I did this thing on Scrooge. It's an original script that I wrote about Scrooge, but it's very Monty Python-esque, and it's better for me having worked with people like him and others that you just draw from. I always say it's garbage in, garbage out, good stuff in, good stuff out. The better people you can work with.
And
it's
where
like
can
tennis.
people find that?
Mindstream is on every platform. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Podcaster, Amazon Music. If you look up the word Mindstream, and the name of that particular episode is called The Festivus Incident. And it's very Peter Sellers, very Monty Python. So you can check it out. If you just go Mindstream Players, it'll come up.
Okay, Mindstream Players.
Yeah.
There you go, folks. Be cool, Scooby-Doo.
Yes, I was the staff writer
my
on that.
Scooby-Doo is one of my favourite things from when I was a child.
Oh yeah, when did you first encounter it?
I was in England, because I grew up in
Yeah?
England, and the first one was Scooby-Doo, the actual Scooby-Doo,
The original series.
the original
Yeah.
series.
Yeah, Be Cool Scooby-Doo was a thing that Warner Brothers was doing as a series. And John Colton Barry was developing the series, was like, Tom, I want a really irreverent sort of deconstruction of the old Scooby-Doo show. We want to make it funny and kind of crazy and whatever. And we thought of you. So I ended up going in, and I was staff writer for 2 seasons on it. And the first episode I did was called Area 51 Adjacent. It wasn't
damn.
actual Area 51. It was adjacent. It was 2 more secret than Area 51. And I loved writing for animation because it was very liberating, anything I could come up with. But the extra cool thing was I'd written one part for myself in it, which was this General Stahl in it. Very funny character, very anarchic. I lavished all this attention on it. Well, they brought in Mark Hamill, and Mark wanted to play that part. And of course, it's like, that's the one I lavished the most. I was like, of course he does. That's the one I wrote really, really carefully. So I got to write for Luke Skywalker, for Mark Hamill. He's in that episode, and it was so gratifying because one of the reasons I had moved out here, of course, as a kid, I saw Star Wars, and I told my parents I'm leaving home. I was like 10. And I did. I was an only child, and I told my parents we were driving back from the movie theater, and I said, I don't belong here. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm leaving as soon as I possibly can. And my mom goes, well, what are you going to do with us? And I said, I'm going to put you in the home.
You never, Tom Konkle, you bad boy.
I did.
Go to the corner.
And the day after I graduated, I packed my car and I drove 3,000 miles to get here. Didn't know anybody, and burned the boats. The best way my life philosophy is, for something like that, burning the boats for me gave me a path where there was no plan B. There was no recourse. It was, I'm going to arrive and I'm going to find out a way to do it. There was no safety valve. There wasn't some other thing I could do. There wasn't an easy escape. It forced me to come up with creative ways to do it. And I know, throughout history, explorers would come and sometimes they burn their boats so that the crew and the people couldn't go back. So they had to figure out a way to live in some distant land or encountering another culture. I came out directing at first because I had gone to school and done theater and cinema and things and knew the camera. I'm very technical, as you probably know, because I do visual effects and stuff. Lumen Actus Productions is my production company in Burbank. And it's vertically integrated. We have, pre-production, writing, development, pre-visual, production, and then post. We do everything from the initial editing, mixing, color grading, everything that you need. And I know how to do all of those things. And something that I did that was reversed is the first thing I did was I directed a television pilot when I first came out here. And I ended up showing the actors sort of what I wanted because it was a sketch comedy show. And the producer, this guy, Mark, comes on and he's like, why aren't you in this? And I was like, no. I want to direct. I want to direct. So I'm actually one of the rare cases of a director who went back into acting instead of an actor who wanted to direct. And it gave me a sensitivity that a lot of people don't have because every actor at the end of every take, you probably know this, Samantha, at the end of every take, you're the director. Here's what happens. You do the scene, you do it, and everyone goes, how was it? Was it all right? Is that good? And you know that feeling. Was it? Yeah, it was good. And so I know that.
Can
feeling.
I watch it?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Can I watch it? Was it okay? I didn't feel it. Yeah. And there's always that feeling, and I know that feeling as a director, and as an actor, I lived it. So I've been very sensitive that no matter how technical the stuff gets, if it's visual effects, like one of the things about Seven Seals with this thing with Tony is that is a very world building technical thing. But at the end of the day, if you're a showrunner on something like that, people care about the faces. They care about how they feel. Whenever I approach a scene, it's like, how am I supposed to feel in this scene? Because the way I feel dictates how it looks, how it sounds, how it's performed. Everything is sort of a tone poem, and you should understand the relationships with the sound off. You should still be able to follow the relationships, the power shifts between all the people, and it all comes down to performance. You can always tell if something's going to be good because it doesn't just start out with mechanical things. It's not just pictures of ships, pictures of wheels, pictures of things. It's like, no, it's faces. People remember how they felt, and they remember the expression on people's faces in movies and TV. And so I bring that knowing all the technical stuff, but I'm not a tech head who only cares about, the gear. It's like, we shot this in 8K and 70 millimeter. And it's like, I know all that, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly.
You capture the emotion.
Yeah, because people care about how they felt.
People might forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Yes. That is very true. And that's true of storytelling. You may forget the details of plot, because plot's just what happens. What you remember is how you felt about the characters.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And that, for me, that's the ongoing learning for the rest of my life. It's like, how do I catch that in a bottle? Like, when I fail spectacularly at it, why didn't it work? Or if somebody loves something, why did it work? Often, something working is more confusing. And I'll tell you. Stop me if you heard this story, but Anthony Hopkins told this great story. He went to go see Laurence Olivier perform live because he was going to understudy him, and he went into the live theater and he watched him perform the show, and he's sitting there like, it's amazing. He's in his moment. He's creating all these moments with the audience. The timing, everything is down there. It's beautiful. At the end of it, everyone loved it. He walks off the stage. And Anthony Hopkins is like, oh my, I'm understudying this. He's a young lad. And so he goes, I'm going to go back to the green room, back to the dressing room, and say congratulations. And he goes in and he opens the door, and Olivier is alone. And Anthony Hopkins walks into the room, and Olivier is crying. He's sitting in front of the mirror, and he's literally got tears in his eyes. And he's like, what is wrong? that was the best thing I've ever seen. That show was perfect, and you found all the notes. And Olivier looks up at it and he goes, "I know, I don't know what I did." It was
Oh,
perfect.
that's awesome.
Yeah. And for me, that's what you're chasing. You're chasing that moment of the unknown happy accident that's perfect.
Yeah. When something is going wrong, whether it's with cast or just the direction, or how do you overcome that?
It's a really great question. The way I overcome it usually is falling back. If you don't have the moment and you're having trouble, you fall back on technique and your bag of tricks. And having a technique means you have some sort of organizing principle around righting the ship or getting it back. And you need to create the environment where it works. And when it's not working, a lot of times that means that either people aren't feeling connected to it, or there is a disconnect from what they're not feeling heard. Like, I need this and I'm not getting this and I'm flailing. Or if it's creatively, I'm going, this is just off. It's like music. When you hear it on, you know it's on, but you don't know exactly how it's on. You can only approximate it. So I approach it where I go back to my bag of tricks, but then the first thing I do is kind of go, well, how did I create this environment? And did this environment foster this? Or is there something fundamentally wrong, with the blueprint that we're doing? The blueprint being the story, or this, am I shooting it in a way, am I tiring people out because I'm shooting their long shots, and then by the end of the day you go in their close-up and they've already given you everything they had. You should have shot the close-ups. So you adjust and hopefully pivot, and they follow you if you make your intention clear. Like, leadership is not just dictating what you want people to do, but making them understand why they're doing it. Who must I become because I have to play that part? But at the same time, what must that part become because I must play them?
Oh, I like that.
And both of those things happen for me when I'm doing it. It's like, you have to look inside yourself as to what your connection is, but then you make the character your own so that no one can imagine someone else playing it. When I did Trouble Is My Business, I always had wanted to play this kind of schlubby guy who has all this stuff happen to him, but he's still kind of hard-boiled. He's like a knight with shining armor that's rusted now, and he's kind of this everyman. And I thought, wow, can I do this? Like, can you carry this feature while you're directing it and connect to a character that would have been at home in the 1940s, which, I'm not from the 1940s. No. So I immersed myself in what was the attitude at the time. Look at the literature of the time. There was this kind of hard-boiled attitude that came out of the war, and you needed to be that prosperous to be that cynical back then. So I took those two things and I thought, these are people that are of the street and blue collar, but they talk poetically. They talk above their station, which in a way is like Shakespeare. That the lowliest character in Shakespeare still talks in this very beautiful and above their station way. Well, look at film noir. The voiceovers in film noir are poetry. And the dialogue is like jazz, And so once I started bantering with, Brittany, who played the femme fatale in it, or my partner, Dave Beeler, was my partner in the detective agency, we got this rhythm and banter, and I found it while we were running it. And I like to do what's called an Italian, which is where you do the script as fast as humanly possible from beginning to end. Oh, wow. And then when you slow down, it feels like you're taking the weights off, So you did it as fast as you can, and then I'd be like, okay, now we bring it back down, and it feels like, oh, I've relaxed into this. I started off as a guest star, and they were looking for people that had a background to be able, theater background, because when you do a reality show, you usually do that scenario 6 to 8 times in one day to get one good scenario out of it. So it's very much like putting on the same live play, because all the cameras are hidden and locked down, and you become this character, and you have to play it over and over again and find new levels. And what I loved about it was each time you could look in the other person's eye, and this would be their mark, like scare tactics. They didn't know, but you could look into their eye and you could just see. They were like, are you real? Like, they wanted to connect to you, and you bring them into that world, and it's like Fantasy Island. They're completely involved in it at this point. I literally have played a doctor, and even after they've revealed the show's fake, they've asked me for medical advice after the filming, because they're like, I had this thing, and I'm like, I'm not really a doctor.
You know what? You were very good. You were very good at playing one, though. Obviously.
Obviously, they're asking for medical. But I had one thing happen you'll love, Samantha. This was I played we were at Venice Beach, and I played this guy named Ravel. He was a psychic, and he talked like this. He's like, "You must come into my tent, and I will read your mind." Yes, I'll read your palm. And so you had to do it 8 or 9 times. Well, one guy comes in, and he's kind of disheveled. You're like, "What is he doing at the beach?" He had a full suit on and a briefcase.
Oh, dear.
And I sit him down, and it was comedy gold. Like, everything he gave me was like a softball. Like, whack! I could come up with a new joke, a new thing around it, and he completely bought it. Halfway through the fortune telling, though, he goes, "I'm so glad I came to see you. You know, I just stole a ton of money from the mob in Las Vegas, and I'm on run. I'd like to know what you do." And I'm sitting here thinking, this is going to be on NBC. This is like everything I'm saying. There's no way this is going to air. There is no way you're going to admit to stealing from the mob and it airs. We finished it, and he found out it was an NBC show, and he signed the release to have it air. Yeah, the power of television. Yeah, okay. He was like, "Is it going to be on TV?"
I've got a very serious question.
Yes.
Did he put himself in the witness protection program?
I would hope so. I never heard from him again. Yeah. No, isn't that? It's so strange what people will confess, but the lure of being in a hidden camera show was so strong that he still signed the release.
Wow.
You know? And I was wow. To me, yeah, balls. Yeah.
I was going to say that, but I refrained. Bigger than his suitcase, obviously.
Yeah, he's got. Yeah, exactly. And I tell you that was the fun thing about spy TV and scare tactics was it really was like creating a reality in a bubble for people, and it was dangerous sometimes. It really was. It was a high wire act. But I enjoyed it. You know, I did it for a couple years, a couple different network shows. One was, I think, Sci-Fi, and one was an NBC show. One time it was really highly, like, one of my favorite sort of benchmark things is I was filming a Honda commercial. I was filming it in Bozeman, Montana, where they filmed A River Runs Through It. Mm-hmm. And I was doing this Honda Pilot commercial. And I open up USA Today. This dates me. I open up USA Today, and I think... Yeah, it was the half hour before Friends. It was the show that I did, the hidden camera show. It was #1 with Friends as a lead-in. So for like 1 week, I had a #1 show on NBC before Friends, and here I was up to my knees in mud, and just standing there, and I was like, "This is not how I imagined having a #1 show on NBC." And I'm just covered in mud and freezing my butt off doing this thing. But that was it. There wasn't anybody with me that I knew because I was the only person in the spot. So I couldn't turn to someone and go, "Hey," you know. So it's never how you imagine success. No. It never comes the way you think it is. But I remember that moment so clearly because I started laughing because I'm like, okay, covered in mud, freezing. No one cares.
And they think Hollywood is all glamour. Well, let me show you that it's not.
It isn't. It isn't. And no one cares. Not. You know, it means something to me because it's why I moved here.
If you were going to inspire the younger generation, what would be your main focus?
If I knew what I know now, then I think it would have been a shorter distance to get to some of the potential and things. So I think I would make myself available as a reference and as a resource for people that want to go into this business. And I've already done that. I've guest appeared at UCLA and various colleges talking about the business of writing or directing or acting. But I think it's so important to mentor people, to make yourself available and share, a lot of the war stories. Everyone has to go on their own path and make their own mistakes, but there are some mistakes you can make less of. And I think having somebody that can mentor you a little bit and help you on your way is important. And as far as just wisdom of it, I would just tell people that nothing good has ever come that I forced it. I think if you live your life where you're not making things happen, but creating an opportunity for things to happen, it's a very different way of living your life. The John Cleese thing isn't something that I could have planned. It's not something where I went, I'm going to be 35 and I'm going to work with John Cleese on a special about football. That isn't a plan and it's not possible. However, I'm going to study for 15 years sketch. I'm going to absorb everything I can. I'm going to meet all the people that make shows, that become aware of my talents, know what I'm doing. That creates an opportunity that I never knew existed, which was that show. And I think the lesson in all of that is anything you do for the money or you force tends to be a complete disaster. I've never done something where I had to talk myself into, well, I'll charge a whole lot of money and I don't really want to do this and I do it. It never works. In fact, have a no price. Have a price so high when you don't want to do something that at least you'll be paid a tremendous amount of money for doing something you don't want to do. But know that it's not going to be a great experience because you're going into it justifying to yourself why you have to do it. And don't force it. Nothing can be forced. You just have to create this giant open opportunity for things to fall in. Yes, you'll have the expertise. Yes, you'll be ready for it, but you won't go, I have to. Today, I'm going to call somebody and I'm going to get this part. Or today, I'm going to make this film and it's going to win an award. It's like, it's as arrogant as saying, well, today we're filming an award-winning movie. It's like, how do you know it's going to be an award-winning movie? It's like, you can't force it. Here's a great one. The first time I saw my own movie in the movie theater with an audience, it was like an out-of-the-body experience. It's like I had never seen the movie before in my life. I'm watching a scene with me in it, and I'm looking around the Lemley going, I'm seeing it through their eyes, not mine. I got to enjoy it all over again because of their reaction and the way they were doing it. And that's such a powerful drug. It's almost like in golf when you get a hole in one. Yeah. That's what keeps you going for the 100 times you miss, And so I feel like that's the hole in one, is that feeling of enjoying something again through their eyes that you created, which I think is why AI will never be creative. Is AI doesn't feel the joy of creating. No. It doesn't need the approval. It isn't enjoying it while it's doing it. It's just copying it. But a human being is creating and enjoying. Even if it's reading something, you're enjoying it out loud while you're reading it. And that's what kept me going.
Right. No AI, no matter how technologically advanced it is, will be able to capture a human emotion. Ever.
Correct. It will not know the joy of creation, and I think it's partly because we don't know where it comes from, so it's impossible to program into something. Right. But also, it's not necessary for a machine or an artificial, intelligence or software. They don't need that approval. There's something in us that needs to be fed that a machine doesn't need, which is why it can work 24/7 and do whatever. But it's always going to be a soulless kind of genie that summons up plagiarized art that we've already created, and it's just resynthesizing it into something else. Art is the thing that makes us human, and that's what connects us. That feeling travels to any country, to any society. We all grieve, we all feel loss in that, and you have to have that. You have to visit it. You have to experience it, and that's why people say, well, the arts are a luxury or whatever. Yes, except if you just want a mundane life where nothing has meaning, then you can just be a little worker bee and not feel anything. But art is what, as an audience, elevates you, and you have a communal experience. But as someone creating art too, you have this beautiful feeling of conveying feelings where people go, God, I know what that feels like. Or, oh, God, I don't want to face that. I don't know how I'll feel when that happens to me.
Right. And people relate to human emotions because we've all life, death, sadness, happiness. We all can relate to it at some point. So, and music, and it can change the mood of a room too.
Oh, absolutely! It's the whole point.
Right. So thank you for sharing that about the AI.
Sure.
I hope they don't ruin it. I hope we'll be able to keep. There's so many things in this world that's dark and takes us away from our humanity, and I hope film isn't going to do that with AI.
I do too, Samantha. I really hope you're right.
Yeah, because the actors need to be paid fair, and they need to be paid to be in front of the camera or behind the scenes or whatever. There's a big production that people behind the scenes.
You have to get paid, otherwise it's a hobby. If you don't get paid, you can't train. You can't be available to do it. You become an amateur. In the best sense, an amateur is able to do it, but they don't rely on it as their living. A professional, if I don't write or act or direct, I don't eat. And there's a big difference. And if I tell people, they're like, well, what's it like? And I'm like, well, it's like plumbing. Let's imagine this. So you're a plumber, and 20 years ago, if you did a certain amount of plumbing really well, you made this much money. Well, now, if what happened to plumbing happened to actors and writers, you would do triple or quadruple the work and get paid an eighth of the money, but still be expected to do the same plumbing over and over and over again. And that's the difference. Is now they want more for less, and they want to be able to say, no, we're not going to pay residuals, or we want your likeness in perpetuity. You don't need to come in and get paid again. We'll just use you, and we'll quantify your art. And it doesn't work that way. The arts are online. The reason that robots want to replace, blue collar workers, people on the line, people that do things with their hands. But AI is a threat to people that have a cerebral or artistic, because it lives on the internet. We've put all of our human experience and art on the internet. So what's the first thing it does? It scrounges the internet, gets all of our art, all of our stuff, and then plagiarizes it and copies it and spits it back out. And it's just a robot predicting, oh, well, this word, and maybe this word, and how about this? And we have not decided, was that the right thing to do? Do you remember how quickly this happened, Samantha? It was like there was no Chat GPT 3 years ago, and then all of a sudden, everyone has it.
Everyone has it. Yeah. You and Russell Crowe looking like twins.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Where am I now?
Yeah, and I was looking at the glasses, and like, we have the same glasses on. Wait, we have the same hat on. We have the same beard. We kind of have the same face here. So I'd love to work with him too. I actually have this project that I want to, when the strike's over, and it was postponed during COVID, and now I've been developing it. Vernon's in it as well. It's an Australian film, but there's a part that Russell will be amazing in. It's a science fiction adventure. And it's funny that now we've been kind of trolling back and forth on each other on Twitter. I'm going to see if I can reach out after the strike's over and say, hey, would you read this? Because you're literally someone that I wrote this with in mind. And I think he and I would get along great, actually. We're very similar types. So I would love to at least have the opportunity to have him go, no,
Yeah. How has music inspired your life?
Wow, it has literally been the soundtrack of my life. I can't imagine driving without some kind of music playing, because it makes the voyage go by. It sets my mood. I write to music. I played music really seriously for about 12 years. I started taking piano very young, and it gave me an appreciation for not only soundtrack music, but good pop music for all different genres, because once you kind of have in your mind how it's played and how it works, you can appreciate it on different levels. It's like, well, emotionally I feel this, but also, wow, that's virtuoso playing, or how did they come up with that idea? So for me, editing is musical, comedy is musical, everything is about timing and mood. And so I can't imagine a world where I didn't have music accompanying me all the time, because I do. Nothing really lives for me in a film until I put music under it, and I go, I had a goosebump moment. Like, for example, Trouble Is My Business, the ending montage where we start unraveling what happened, the why done it of it. Once I had that piece of music, I had given cues to the composer. I said, I want a little John Barry, I want a little John Williams a little bit. I want Bernard Herrmann. Yeah. Put all that synthesized, but create it. Once I laid that music underneath the scene, I got goosebumps. Like, literally, the guy Mike I was editing with, who helped me produce it, we were jumping up and down, and we're like, that's it. And the edits hit on every beat of the music, and I had never heard the music before, but I knew it was cut right because the cuts fell exactly as the music was transitioning, and that was it. It was done.
Beautiful.
So for me, pop music is my soundtrack when I'm doing stuff. Soundtracks are an emotional, they're literally another timeline. There's the visual timeline, there's the dialogue timeline, and the music one, and all of them are important. Yes. So I just can't imagine without music.
Is there any charities that you would advocate for? Not necessarily donate, because not everyone can, but if you could advocate for one, which would it be? And why?
First off, I mean, American Cancer Society, because so many people are affected by cancer. Locally here, there's one called Delta Rescue, which is a no-kill animal shelter for pets, and they literally never. I mean, once they get a dog or a cat or something, that has a home forever, and they have been around for several decades now. But I actually did a video for them, like a recruiting thing to get more money. Um,
Oh, you
I
just
also
stole
did
my
some.
heart.
Yeah, no, it's very important, and it's because it's a no-kill shelter. It's not like, oh, they found a dog, this dog is doomed. The dog's going to have a home, or the cat's going to have a home
Right.
forever. The other sort of, it's not really a charity, but it's more of an awareness, is I've done 2 films for the deaf where it's all signing language. There's no dialogue. It's all taught in sign language. It's all done in time, with sign language.
Oh,
And
wow.
in real time, and you learn how to cut, because in a conversation, you know how you cut to the other person listening and then you cut back in a movie. You can't do that with sign language. You
No.
have to see their hands at all times.
Right.
So it forced me to have a new way of shooting, where the intensity of the scene was the position of the camera relative to the person talking. The loudness was indicated through visual and through motion and what they're doing, but you keep their hands in at all time or you lose the dialogue.
Right.
And for teenagers, they've got to learn, like, this is what your medical results are going to be. This is how you get through life. And so much of their language is symbolic. When you say I'm going to go fast, it's often train go by. And
Right.
and you're like, oh, that's a whole other way of looking at the world.
Right.
So donating my time, or even being paid by one of these organizations to do something to communicate to their people, to the people that rely on them for information, whether it's people that want to rescue animals or the deaf or Cancer Society. I feel like that's sort of part of the duty of being a communicator, a storyteller, is to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Is one of the best live performances of my life was for a charity. Now that you mention it, there was a cure for autism, and it was at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. And they asked me to do one of the sketches that I had written, and I did it with my sketch partner, Dave Beeler. And it's about a mime who sees something tragic, and it strikes him talking, and then his father dies in an air box of his own construction. He suffocates because he suggests the
Oh,
box too
no.
well. Yeah. So I go to perform this. I had no idea who was going to be in the audience, but this was a ooh la la audience. I walk out, and backstage is Catherine O'Hara, all these comedy giants doing it, and me doing a sketch. I walk out on stage with him to do the sketch. Ben Stiller, Lily Tomlin, all these people in the audience, like front and center. So I just blazed through this thing, and it was the best experience making them laugh.
Right.
Making them watching you do what you do and enjoying it. Like, Ben Stiller came up after, he's like, is that a classic sketch? Does Monty Python do that, or Peter Cook? And I'm like, no, that's mine. He's like, that was really good. And I was like, well, thank you, Ben Stiller.
I know,
and
that's
and
what he's
and
awesome,
yeah, oh, he's great. And making Catherine O'Hara laugh, who I grew up watching on Second City, and just hearing her giggling backstage was very rewarding. And the whole thing was for charity. So
That's
all these
awesome.
people came out, and being part of the reason they came out, and sort of getting to entertain them and get some feedback while you're doing Cure for Autism was amazing.
Oh. So, Tom, if people needed to find you on social media, what's your handle and what social media platforms can they find you on?
I should be pretty easy to find. On Twitter, it's Tom Konkle. Instagram, Tom Konkle, really imaginative. On YouTube, my channel is The Real Deal with Tom Konkle, and you'll find movies that I've done, sketches, everything on there. But yeah, say hello. Let me know if you've watched something, or if you have some question or whatever. You can find me there, or Facebook. My next film is called Island in the Stars, and there's a Facebook page, so you can join the Island in the Stars Facebook page and get updates as the movie gets going. And that would be how to find me.
Tom, if this was the last time you were ever going to speak to anyone, or an audience, or just a crowd, what would you say?
I would probably say I will miss all of you, and I feel like what little of me I leave behind, I hope if you're sad or you think of me, if you put on some silly thing that I've done or some movie or anything, and it makes you smile or you go, that guy, then it will have made it all worth it. It was a weird trip, but it was worth taking.
I love that. That was a weird trip, but it was worth taking.
Everyone should know that they all have something to say, and we all have our voice, and take the time to find out what your purpose is, and find out what makes you happy, what brings you peace, and do more of it. There's so much noise now and so much stress, and I think people are all working at 11, it goes to 11. And I feel like we all need to take time and find those things that are important to us and embrace some kind of gratitude, because the secret to happiness is a bad memory and gratitude.
Well, thank you so much for being on Chatbox
It was a pleasure,
with Sam.
Samantha.
Tom, it's been an honour and a pleasure to meet you in person and talk to you on Chatbox with Sam.
Thank you. You too. Mwah.
I'm a bright star in the nighttime. I'ma go hard when it's my time. Yeah, I'm hard and I'm light. You know you can't pause when the time's right. Sitting in the storm.